All right, everybody. I think we're going to get this party started. So, welcome to Roundabout Books. My name is Julie. I'm the events manager here. Before we get started, I just wanted to ask a quick question. Who is here in Roundabout for the very first time? Please just raise your hand. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has been here before. We want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that our bookstore resides on the ancestral unceded land of the Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs. In our immediate area are also the unceded lands of the Confederate Tribes of Siletz Indians and the Tribes of Grand Ronde. We encourage everyone to learn more about the land you occupy and the stories of its peoples. Many of those can be found here in our local section, or if there's a particular one you're looking for, please ask the bookseller. And then a quick reminder, our last two author events of the year are coming up this Thursday. Lauren Kessler will be talking about immersive reporting and highlighting her most recent book, Free, 2 Years, 6 Lives, and the Long Journey Home. And then our last book event of 2020 is December 6th, when we will celebrate the Central Oregon Writers Guild Literary Anthology, which we actually just got copies in today. So if you're interested in writing of local people, check that out. It's got about 40 different authors in there. And then more information about our events and book clubs can be found at roundaboutbookshop.com. So for tonight's event, I want to let everybody know what's going on with the books that are available for purchase. So Raquel Gutierrez's book is still available, even though they're not able to join us tonight because they are still part of the MFA low residency. So if you're interested in Brown Neon, please grab a copy. Jennifer Reimer's book, Keshka. Did I say it right? Keshke. Oh, so close.
So close.
We have one copy left, and if you want one, you can always order more. Kaui's book, The Descendants, is available right down there. And then we will be taking orders for Irene Cooper's book, Found, but we also have her other most recent publication, Spare Change, available right up here. So we have a lot of books that you guys could take home with you tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, who is going to talk with our authors. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. So first of all, of course, we would like to extend our gratitude and appreciation to Roundabout Books for hosting another OSU Cascades event for us. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Julie. Thank you to the wonderful team at Roundabout Books for allowing us to use your space to host these literary events. We love doing it, and we hope you do too. I'd also like to thank OSU Cascades for also supporting the MFA program and the literary arts here in Bend, Oregon. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite both of our authors to read a little bit from something, and then we'll open it up for a conversation and questions. I have some questions, and I know that you all have questions as well. So it'll be a little bit informal, okay? I will introduce our two authors tonight, and if I have left anything out of these bios, I hope you will fill them in. You know, like swam the English Channel at age 13, something that didn't make it onto the internet. Please correct me. Our first reader tonight is the one and the only Irene Cooper. Irene Cooper is the author of Found, a new psychological thriller from Atmosphere Press. Committal, a speculative spy-fi about family from vegetarian alcoholic press. And Spare Change, a poetry collection from the good folks at Finishing Line Press. Spare Change was a finalist for the Stafford Hall Award, as well as the Oregon Book Award earlier this year. She co-edited with Ellen Santasiero Placed, an encyclopedia of Central Oregon, an anthology of Central Oregon writing. Poems, stories, and reviews appear in The Feminist Wire, Phoebe, Denver Quarterly, The Manifestation, The Rumpus, Witness, and elsewhere. Irene also is part of the Forge writing project here in Central Oregon. She teaches in community and lives with her people and a corgi in Oregon, in Bend. Welcome, Irene. Take it away. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Do I need this?
No.
If I stand up, do I need this?
Yeah.
All right. Then I need this. Cover design by Bridget Lewis. I'm gonna get a load of this thing, really, for real. It doesn't fit in there. Sorry. The image permeates the membrane and flashes in breaths, when she's awake as well as when she sleeps. It is only the two of them on the bus. The galloping vista from the window varies in geography, but never in color. It is a psychedelic rendering of the coastal town of her childhood. It is a painted sandscape of a desert in the southwest, the colors, a saturated red, ochre, the blue of a pulsing vein. All undulating in speed, at shattering breakneck speed toward an edge and end toward the drop. Awake or asleep, when they reach the sucking lip, she is drenched. The martial blare of the telephone breaks the dark surface of the room, and the dream divides, disperses, retreats into the deep of Eleanor Clay's bones, absorbs into skin, settles in the limbic recesses tucked behind reason. Hello? Eleanor, it's Gordon. Listen, I think it's time we brought you in on the Lizzie Barrett case. We're at the train station. What have you got? Nothing. Not a thing. That's just it. I hate to give up on a missing 3-year-old, but we're about out of time. Best case scenario, you come up with nothing too. Even as Detective Gordon Stanislaus said the words, he knew Eleanor would do her job successfully. He didn't make the call until that outcome was all but inevitable. She would find the child, and the child would be dead, case closed. She found small things, easily lost. An earring backing in silvery late summer grass, a key at the beach. Her ability to recover the small and precious thing, a domestic superpower. If the object were to be found, she would, or it would find her. Eleanor didn't search so much as make herself available, put her body and its senses in the way of the lost article until a glint or a break in the pattern of the landscape drew her attention. Every recovery felt like a conclusion. Restored to the one who suffered the loss, the object fell without a trace from her consciousness, as if it had never held it. Eleanor found the first child, small and precious and missed, months after Frey had drowned, but before Emmett and Levi moved to Denver, away from Bristlecone Springs. The lost thing was not hers, but as with the jewelry and the keys, the finding was a certainty, a fact to breathe into being. The child was dead, of course. They would be these small people she'd been discovering on behalf of the Bristlecone Springs Police Department for the last decade or so, 18 children to date. Eleanor had been called in to find number 19, which meant that the detectives were not expecting to find the missing little one alive. Eleanor didn't show up until all other options had been exercised. A flash of red, a thread of yellow. In the bus station, Eleanor pulled from beneath and behind 2 rows of lockers at the rear of the terminal a chunky red knit sweater about the size of a composition notebook, a yellow canary embroidered on the front. She's not here, but she's not gone, said Eleanor. A terrible force flapped her ribcage. Stanislaus gave orders to the uniformed police. Talk to the drivers and the ticket agent again. This was their 3rd visit to the station since the child's father had reported her gone. She's not gone. Give me someone to look by the river. Eleanor didn't elaborate. She's not gone. Well, said Stanislaus, she's not here. And they were nowhere, he thought. The Amber Alert drew nothing credible. The sweater was new evidence. There might be more. He could retrace and review, put the dog to better use. But it was Eleanor who found it, not his regular team, and experience said that meant only one thing. We got nothing, he thought. Yeah, okay, Eleanor. Drugs. Stanislav signaled to his detective in a uniform. Go with Eleanor. She thinks the river. In all these years, he still felt a freight elevator drop into his bowels when Eleanor said she had something. He'd never known her not to come up with a body, and if Eleanor's antenna were tingling, a body was all he anticipated now. He'd never feel at ease around that woman, but he couldn't and wouldn't deny her record. Macabre talent she had, and not much else, having lost one kid to the Roaring Fork, and another, plus the husband, to fallout. Bring the dog.
Thank you, Irene. So what we'll do is we'll hear from, let me come around here, both of our authors first, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Excuse me. Kaui.
Hi.
Hi. We're so excited to have Kaui Hart Hemmings here. Kaui is serving as our distinguished visiting writer for the MFA program in this fall term. Kaui Hart Hemmings has degrees from Colorado College and Sarah Lawrence, and was a Stegner Fellow at Stanford University, which we'll try to forgive her for. Go Bears. Her first novel, a New York Times bestseller, thank you, The Descendants, has been published in 22 other countries and is an Oscar award-winning film directed by Alexander Payne and starring George Clooney. And as her Twitter profile says, she's also the author of 4 other books you've never heard of. And those books include a short story collection, House of Thieves, the novels How to Party with an Infant, The Possibilities, and a YA novel, Juniors. She lives in Hawaii, and we are so excited to have her with us here in Bend this week. So please welcome Kaui.
Sorry about my. No, I'm a little dry too. I like that you just started in. I often find it's hard to explain the plot of something. I'm going to read from The Possibilities, which is set in Breckenridge, Colorado. I thought it was fitting, but I feel like it's hard to find your footing when you're explaining a plot of a novel, so I'm going to just say the bare minimum for the part I'm going to read, which is about Sarah St. John, the main character of this novel, has just lost her son to an avalanche. He's 22 years old, and this is her first time going back to work, so it's raising all sort of issues. At the sorry, I don't want to read for too long. Okay. At the crosswalk, I go around the family. I pass Shirt and Ernie's, almost to my destination, when I see the owner of the shop, Lorraine Bartlett, making a beeline toward me. I pretend I haven't seen her and try to find my phone in my purse so I can do the hi, I'm on the phone walk by. But she gets to me before I can get to it. Sarah! Lorraine, I say, hi there. She approaches with that dreaded look of reverence. How are you, she says, her voice syrupy. She looks around like we're on a stealth mission. I'm okay, you? I take a step back. Hanging in there, she says. Well, more than hanging, I'm doing well actually. Pete got into law school. Danny found a new pet project, the garage, so we'll see how that goes. And on and on. One question launches 1,000 ships. I cross my arms over my chest and grin. I look around as if for help. I feel like a trapped bird. She too had a son who was killed in an avalanche years ago. Cully, my son, her son, Sarah's son, was in 8th grade when it happened, and her son was a senior in high school. His body was never found. Lorraine came over a few days after Cully died and tried to recruit me into grieving the way she had grieved, which was by wearing pins stamped with her son's face and giving interviews to the local newspapers advertising her club, PAD, Parents Against Avalanche Disaster, as if by not joining PAD, You were fond of avalanche disaster. While I see common experience, at the same time I hate it, how it weakens my own pain, which I cherish. I cringed as Lorraine stood at my front door and said, "We need to stick together." She kept walking into my house, into the kitchen, lured by the glint of picture frames perched upon the shelf behind the wet bar. "Please, help yourself," I said, before realizing it was the picture serving as the magnetic field and not the booze. I was disappointed because for a moment I was thinking drinking might get us through. We could do shots, cry, laugh in that order. I reluctantly went over to the bar and looked at the pictures, at Kaui's lovely eyes. I touched the photographs, pressed my finger upon him. I said something. I forget what exactly. Something false and poetic, like, "Sometimes I feel like he's just in the other room." I regretted it immediately, feeling the flashlight of the heartbreak police chastising me for doing heartbreak all wrong. I started to hate Lorraine Bartlett for making me feel I had to somehow prove my sorrow. "Our boys," she said, looking at me with a scary intensity. I forced myself not to look away, to furrow my brow and look at her small, milky blue eyes and her stub nose. None of her features really went together. It was like she was designed by committee. "They love the same things." She laughed quickly. They probably would have wanted to go this way, doing what they loved. I didn't look away. I stared into her eyes as if they were an oncoming truck. "Come on, fucker," I thought. "You gotta swerve after a comment like that." But she didn't. Doing what they loved? Kaui was at A Basin, off the trails, with friends from work. It's a place he'd go to all the time. Avalanches happen. He had the beacons, he had the poles, he had the experience, and an ego that was intact. He was a mountain kid. He had outrun avalanches before. Lorraine's son didn't know shit about the backcountry. He took basic skills in 5th grade, which taught kids like him how to throw a ball. The point is, they were not alike. I saw my son dead. The medic told me not to look, to wait until they got him down, but I felt I owed it to him. It was the very least I could do, look at him. It was like seeing an ancient artifact. He looked bloated, unnatural, some kind of special effect. The worst thing was that he looked afraid, and I couldn't see how this expression could ever be thawed. This was the last feeling he had in the world, and to this day I imagine him as eternally terrified. He was not happy or thrilled. He was most definitely not doing what he loved, and I should have said to her, "Look, loony bin, imagine me strangling you with a ski breck t-shirt, something you sell, something you apparently love. Boy, she sure loved t-shirts. She would have wanted to die this way." I mean, the fact that someone loves chicken doesn't mean they want to die, or they want to choke to death on a bucket of wings. But I wouldn't have said that then. I wasn't angry then. I wouldn't say it now, because I don't really feel that way. My thoughts just rumble and churn. I remember that day, Lorraine had looked as if she knew an important secret that I would soon learn. I couldn't escape her awful gaze because she was holding my hand between her own as if warming a waffle. I caught sight of the pin she was wearing, advertising the death of Jackson, and couldn't imagine doing that with the image of Kaui, wearing him as an accessory, as if his 22 years of life had become nothing more than a cufflink. Jackson would have been a 26-year-old, not a high school boy, and I imagined he'd be embarrassed by this pin if he were alive. Also, I thought to myself while looking at Lorraine, "You grieve horribly. I'm a classier griever than you." And then, "Kaui, I wish you were here to see this and laugh with me," a thought that still crosses my mind daily. I'm so used to storing things to tell him at the end of the day, collecting anecdotes to hand over. I was thrilled when I had something out of the ordinary to say. He was my sounding board. He was my sound. "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you," Lorraine says to me now. She still has that look, I realize, as if she knows something I'll soon enjoy. As if she knows something that I'll soon enjoy, like a surprise party. Tourists flow by, and I feel like we're a boulder in a stream. I wish I had a witness. I keep looking around for someone to side with me. I'm proud of you too, I say lightly. Your show, she insists. I saw you guys shooting this morning. I think it's wonderful that you're back at work. I know it really helped me. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength. Is she complimenting me or herself? I hate the unearned kudos. People get shot in the head and are called brave when they recover. People lose a son in an avalanche and they're suddenly admirable. I've done nothing. I have no courage. Courage is only possible when you choose to do something. I didn't choose to lose him. And I'm working because I have a mortgage and pride and a father who eats out too much and shops from the couch. I'm here because I need to try to reassemble, to cross the bridge, outwit the trolls. God, Kaui, love that book, The Three Billy Goats Breath. Do you want to grab some coffee, she asked, now? Or whenever? I know it takes a while to fully heal, not that you ever do, but I'd love to tell you more about PAD. I'm still very involved, and I think you'd get so much from it. And with your access to TV, we could, with death, if anything, comes freedom. I grab her shoulder and say, oh my God, I think I'm gonna have diarrhea. Oh my God, she says. You better, the bathroom in the visitor center is the closest. I have a Pepto if you need. I'm fine, I gotta go. And I walk back to my car. Yes, go, she calls, rooting for me to not shit my pants. It's not until I'm in the car that I realized her son is dead, and I just lied to her. I ran from her, and she needlessly admitted to having Pepto. Why, I say out loud. I still don't know how to grieve correctly. I don't think I'll ever know how to express sorrow or to show people that beneath all this is someone kind.
Thank you both so much. So, are there questions, comments from the audience? Someone want to be brave and go first?
Yeah, I'll go.
Chris Robb.
Hey, this quite. I got two questions. I know. I said I had a million. Oh, sorry. And I know I threatened with 1 million questions earlier, but I'll leave it down to 2. So my first question is, okay, so they adopted your book, The Descendants, into a major motion picture. My question is, first question is, how much control did you have over the process when they were adapting it into a screenplay? And do you want me to wait to ask the second question? After ask the second question? All right. So I heard you might be writing a script now. When you get done, what's the process to send it out? And is the process going to be different since you already have, an established movie out with Hollywood? Yeah.
Do I need to repeat or?
No, you're good.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay. Control over the process. I did not have control over the process, but I got it. I didn't ask for it. Alexander Payne, the director, and the producer, Jim Burke. Actually, I was living in San Francisco at the time when it was optioned, but we became pretty fast friends. And I was able to read the script and watch audition tapes and actually suggest that I wanted George Clooney to be the lead and do location scouting and cast my friends who I thought would make for good extras and family members. So it's not that I had control, but I had involvement in the process. And I think part of it was just because they saw that I got along with everybody. And part of it was because they were entering a new world, just as you would want any film director if they came into Bend, Oregon, and they tried to portray Bend in an accurate, authentic way that was actually about the people who lived there. I think they came to Hawaii and wanted to accurately represent it, and I was a pretty good source, you know, I'm right here. So I think they consulted me a lot, but I didn't have control over the process and I didn't want it. And I think that was appealing to them. And oh, as far as screenplays, the screenplays usually I write when I'm waiting, when I'm finished with a book, and I'm kind of, but asking like about screenplay and what to do with them and where to submit, I'm not a good resource for that. It's really something that I'm just like tinkering around with, and I've been writing. I worked on a pilot for HBO, and HBO didn't pick it up, but that's being kind of shopped around. But that's sort of the only experience I have in the TV screenplay land.
Thank you so much.
Take that.
I'm gonna sit down for just a second and we'll be like very inside the actor's studio. I wanna jump in with a question and we'll come back to you guys. Both of you write about grief. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about what it means to each of you to write about grief and how you translate the grieving process onto the page, maybe in terms of elements of craft.
This first.
Yeah, that was really, really fun listening to that reading because it almost is the character in my book, Eleanor's alter ego, in the way of how to respond to the public expectation of grief. In Found, Eleanor doesn't have any idea. It's completely unresolved. It's not moving. It's not going anywhere. She has no society. She has no people. Not even the model of the sort of extreme hyper recovery that you're talking about there. And I think there's something tied into that too about the that the person who has died becomes this like unknowable entity. Like whatever you knew, there's this feeling there was so much more to know, which I also feel is a theme that's going through there. But yeah, I mean grief. Who is a good griever? But the idea that there are expectations for what it's supposed to look like, for how long it's supposed to last, for comportment, for, I think mostly that idea of length. Like people expect you to stop, on some sort of time frame. But, I write about it because I don't really get it.
No, that's good. Yeah. One of my daughter's names is Eleanor. That's funny. I don't know why I've been drawn to it, because I haven't experienced the same grief in the ways that the characters have that are in my books, The Descendants or Possibilities. But yeah, it's something, you write what you know and what you want to know and what scares shit out of you and what makes you just stay up at night and so grief is a lot of it is just it's what you experience and what you haven't like you don't need to write about what you've experienced necessarily, but it just also feels just how it doesn't matter like how a character, I love the way grief can change between characters and the way no one does it. It's like the snowflake, that they don't look alike. So I love that in fiction, the possibilities of, I didn't mean to say that, but the variations of ways people can grieve and what that can do to a narrative.
questions, comments?
Question.
Neil?
Okay, I'm not used to talking. It always feels weird. But, so Irene, I wanted to ask you, a little bit, and I've been reading your writing for a long time anyway. But in
Thank
that, yeah, you're welcome. In the piece that you read, what I find really interesting is this kind of lyrical novel, right? With highly poetic language that seems to be married to the hard-boiled detective narrative, right? The cop story. So so can you say something about, those seem to be, in a lot of ways, disparate voices, right? How do you just say something? I don't even know what my question is really, but say something about kind of marrying those two voices, and like it's the narrator that has the lyrical voice, right? And then the hard, I don't know, I only heard that piece, but then the kind of cop people have a different voice. So if you could say something about maybe the tension between those voices.
Yeah, what I can. I think, I'm one of those websites that's supposed to draw attention to, what I'm doing in the world. It says, novels for poets, poetry for the people. Because all the poets I know don't read novels. We gotta change that. But also this idea, of the many elements that are important to the poem, what is more important than juxtaposition? What is more important than dissonance? Or this idea of collision even. And genre writing is amazingly fun. The idea of having a template, and this happens, and that happens, and this happens, the idea of having that character, the hard-boiled character, but of course, this narrator, as narrators do, I don't have the constraint of first person, where that is a singular voice that needs to maintain, except in really tricky ways where it's not, in a piece. So in this one, that narrative element allows for this breach.
Yeah.
And then, of course, going back in is the break, because as my fabulous, wise, and talented husband would say, it's getting a little poety. Noted.
Oh my God, that's so great.
Questions?
Yes.
Aye.
I don't even know if I need it.
Oh, for the
I
recording.
guess, yes, I suppose. Is it Kaui? What inspired the possibilities? I used to live in Breck, or in Summit County, but I've known people that died in avalanches and stuff, so I'm curious as to what.
That's what inspired it.
Just knowing.
The place that I lived there.
Okay, yeah.
And that's usually what inspires me to write something, is usually the place comes first. And I wanted to write about, I like these idyllic settings where you sort of peel back the curtain and see the inner workings of it all. And I liked the idea, I like a resort town where you get to see the people who actually live and work there, or don't live there because they can't afford it, and so they have to live up in like Blue River or Frisco, or not even Frisco anymore, probably.
Yeah,
That's
you can't
like
live
not
there,
affordable. Things like that, I wanted to know the people who really live there, not the transients, but I wanted to capture the whole world. And also just, I think, I'm trying to think of what initially inspired me, and it was like those founders of a ski resort. It's such an absurd sport in itself, and yet the way, the founders and the way it has grown from what it used to be was just like a really interesting art to me.
Thanks.
Yeah. When did you live there?
8 to 10 years, mostly in the 2000s. Yeah, my husband's on the cover of Ski Book over here.
Of what?
The Ski Book over here, which is kind of
Really?
funny. Yeah, he's a backcountry
I'll look
skier.
at it later.
So I actually saw him cause an avalanche once, but I was helping my
this
friend
one.
move in Dillon.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So I looked over, we're in this parking lot outside this apartment compound, and I look up and there's an avalanche on the mountain, because they're right there, Red Mountain. And I'm like, oh. And then I get a call, and he's like, he had to cancel the call, because they were rushing out from the avalanche. And we had friends that had died and been in a major accidents.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting too. I love the way places change over time, and I feel like if anyone, I'm sure there have been locals here who've witnessed such drastic change over time, and the good things that come with that, and the bad things that come with it, and just think how a town can be so itself and yet unrecognizable at the same time.
I actually got married in A-Basin.
Aww. Sweet.
Not that anybody, if you've been there, it's a ski mountain, but small ski mountain.
That's sweet.
There was a question over here.
Yeah,
Adam.
I don't know if it'll be loud. I can just try. I'll just try to get loud enough.
It's for the recording.
Mine's a process question for both of you. From the first time that you're like, oh, this is an idea, to like, this is good enough to share. About how long was that time frame for yourself? And then also, what would you tell that person right now? Like that first, like you like sipped a cup of coffee and you're like, oh, there's the story. What would you tell that person, like sitting here right now?
I love this. Makes me feel like a talk show host from the 90s. Like the kind of stuff I watched after school.
Yeah, thank you for.
Totally.
Or no, Lisa.
Oh yeah.
Process, inspiration to shareable, and what would you say to the person who got the first thing?
I know. Share to say a public, like an agent and publisher, or to share to like a spouse or whoever, a friend.
Agent to like publisher, like beyond your like your tight writing circle. So that like next level.
Okay. Me personally, obviously me personally, I like to finish something completely. I don't share like snippets of things. And I feel that's what I would tell the person in the coffee shop. Because oftentimes you'll write those 20 pages and think, it's brilliant. You know, you share it. So I think to tell that person is to wait, like sit on it, let it brew, then age, and even have some distance from it, and revise some more, and then a little more, and then share it. But I typically write an entire draft, then I revise it without sharing, and then I'll share it.
I too am pretty share shy, but I had the amazing advantage. So it was a real aggregate idea. There's an entity in this book that is based on a real organization that is a group of forensics experts who volunteer to find bodies in cold cases. And they're from Colorado. That was fascinating. And also led to the idea of genre, playing around with genre, because the other book, somebody invented the word spy-fi, so I had something to call the first novel. I had no idea what the hell to call that thing. Fun, but that. So I also like to have a whole thing, but in this case, I was part of an intimate reading group, affectionately known as Eat with Writers, because it was a lot about the cheese. And I did share it in progress. with this very, very particular small group. Because they're smart, excellent listeners who are not only enthusiastic, but also made me think more and wider about what it could be. So I was extremely fortunate to have that. But typically, yeah, I don't really test the waters until something's a thing. What would I tell the person who had the idea? I don't know. I still feel like that person. I still feel like that person who decides to see where something could go. And allow those, you know, people I trust to help shape it a bit. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, can I add to that?
Like, yeah, I would say if you're in this sort of setting, when you're not quite like setting to publishers, or then I would be more apt to share, because that's where you're really, when you're in a workshop setting, and when you have access to readers who are going to read your work, then yes, because sharing, you're learning how to edit yourself based on their feedback, and you're learning to take criticism, and you're learning to weed it out, and you're learning to work on a little bit of deadline, which is important, but great for a writer to have something, some sort of goal, some sort of.
That's true.
So in that scenario, that's why I asked, is it like for a publishing context, or this when you have like a trusted group of readers? If you have a trusted group of readers, then share.
Questions? Yes. Can I give you the mic?
What are your writing schedules? How often, during the day do you write? How many hours, etc.?
It depends. I usually, when I'm writing something new, I make myself write 3 pages a day, and it usually goes by pretty quickly, because I tell myself just to write 3 pages, and they don't have to be good. I love rewriting. I don't like writing, and so that's why I try to create as much as I can, so then I can go back and really have fun with it. It's the only time I really enjoy writing, during the revising process. But otherwise, I write around kids' schedules and do it when I can.
I used to write what I call in the margins for life reasons, for life reasons, 2 a.m, waiting in the car, all that stuff. I don't do that anymore. I'm in a different position now, and I think it's very project oriented. If I'm working towards something, then I might not have weekday work with other responsibilities. I might not have a lot of time, weekday work, but I will absolutely dedicate whatever space happens in the course of a week, a 2-hour chunk, a 3-hour chunk, toward this big picture, toward getting something out. And I don't necessarily have page or word. If I'm writing anything at all, I'm pretty happy about that. But I agree completely. Revision is very underrated. It's the fun part.
Oh, everyone all at once. How about here in the back?
Kaui, I was wondering if you could speak to that revision process, like maybe what it looks like for you. You finish a first draft and then you set it aside. What does that process look like? And you can pick a specific book if that's better, just overall.
think the process varies with the book. Sometimes I'll change an entire, I'll move to third person to first person after I finish an entire draft. I have changed the sex of a character in the possibilities. I did that. In the Descendants, I did that. I didn't get too far in the Descendants before I switched. At first, I don't even know if anyone's familiar with the Descendants, but there's a mother in a coma. At first, there was a father in a coma. And as I was getting through it, and I didn't even have kids at the time, I was like, there's not so much at stake here with a father in a coma. The mother's got it, you know. She'll know what to do. So I changed that. I even got through the entire. There's a character called Sid, and he's a very amusing boyfriend of the daughter, and I didn't put him in until I finished the entire draft. So. And I don't think this is a good process. I'm not saying that, but it's just the only way I can do it, is just by writing and maybe wasting a lot of time and a lot of pages. But as far as when I write a draft and it's not so significant that I need such a major overhaul, then I can spend as long as I can until school gets out. Like I love the revision process, and I love going away on trips and like doing it at night as well. And yeah, I can really do it for a long time.
Thank you.
This book asked me to do some things a little differently, which may have been one of the reasons I was drawn to the format. In that, in my I'm a poet who's going to write a novel first incarnation, I'm like, I don't have to be linear, narrative arc, who cares? I'm just going to put scenes together and it's going to be great. And to a certain extent, I learned a lot with that. And then after I finished that book, I turned my focus back to poems, and I lean really, really hard on the poems. We were talking about this today in a workshop. I break them open, I reform them, I give them different forms, I sit on every syllable until that thing is, could stand in hurricane. And then this came along, and I had to be much more linear. And that was a very different process to be thinking in terms of plot lines. A plot. And revision, I rewriting, yes. I do a lot of writing that doesn't look like writing. I do a lot of thinking and a lot of research and a lot more thinking, and it doesn't look like I'm doing anything at all. And sometimes I don't think I'm doing anything at all. Yeah. But then, you get that 2 hours on a Sunday, and there's something. And then that something will be a map toward what else it's supposed to be, I think. But all those cliches are true. The work will tell you what it wants. That's the thing about readers too. They have to be invested in what you want as a writer. Otherwise that criticism isn't going to be worth anything.
We have time for one more question. All right, go for it. Take it away.
I had a question. It's about voice, and it's something that you said yesterday, which is something about voice being almost like we really can't get away from the core voice, which I can appreciate. And it's interesting to hear you read Possibilities today, because the inner dialogue was hilarious on that character. And I'm wondering, I guess my question is and how do you push your voice, I know through a character, obviously different points of view, but I was thinking about this week because the memoir work we're doing is, I know what my voice sounds today, but I'm trying to go back and push for the child voice, and you know what I mean? And like, if the two of you could talk about like maybe some sort of trick that you know of to kind of get more real with that. Like, it's hard, it's tricky to step away from yourself to try to get perspective when you're writing that. And I guess in fiction, you create new characters, but I don't know. Does that make sense? Is that a question? Yeah.
I think so. Tava looks like she believes it's a question. So does Sam. All right. Whoa, voice questions. So hard.
Yeah, it is a hard question, you know. But and even in fiction, right? They can't all sound the same.
Yeah.
There's gotta be something to it. Tricks. Let's talk about tricks. Creating dialogue between characters and reading it out loud to yourself, even if it's not germane to the work. Creating scenarios, like every day, making breakfast scenarios between characters and allow them to find their voice and their vocabulary. Having other people read your work to you. Excellent technique. I mean, tricks, because am I gonna say something meaningful about voice here? I think not. But I do feel like there are ways to hear them.
That's my trick. Is creating dialogue, because it's not only creating a voice for a character, but it's surprising yourself as a writer to think you know a character and then actually make them speak. And sometimes it's surprising. I know this sounds kind of like hooey, but when you're in the zone and just sort of writing, especially when you're only doing dialogue and having characters just bounce things off of one another, that really develops a person's voice. And the other, not trick, because I really don't think too consciously about craft when I'm sitting down. I really just write. But I do really let myself step into a role, almost like an actor. And not think about what is it like to sound like a real, 12-year-old? What is it like to sound like a middle-aged man when I was 28 writing this? I don't think about that. I just write it. I'm gonna create what this guy is gonna be like. I'm gonna create what this young kid's gonna be like. And that sort of frees you up a bit.
I did have my kid call me out, by the way, on a youth voice.
Oh, that's interesting.
So thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. After we finish with the formal part of this evening, we encourage you to browse around for a few minutes, buy books, support your local independent bookstore. Thanks very much to Kaui and Irene. And visually.
Yeah, so we'll have the authors sign any books that you want, and then again, we will be taking orders for Irene's Found, which we may be able to get here in the store in just a couple days. So thank you everybody for being here.